My parents tried to force me to donate a kidney to my estranged brother who abandoned me years ago. That's how I discovered the shocking family secret they'd been hiding from me my entire life. I should have seen it coming, really. The Caldwell family specialty was sacrifice specifically. Mine. I still remember the weight of my phone that Tuesday morning, suddenly heavy in my hand as my mother's name flashed across the screen. I hadn't heard her voice in months, not since Christmas when we'd exchanged the usual pleasantries wrapped in polite distance. So when she called at 7:33 a.m., her voice tight with that familiar urgency, something cold settled in my stomach. "Emma, you need to come home. It's an emergency family meeting. This weekend." Not a request, a command. The same tone she used when I was 8 and had to give up my bedroom for visiting relatives, or at 16 when I had to quit the debate team because my brother Alex needed rides to hockey practice. "Mom, I can't just drop everything. I have reports due Monday, and the Peterson account. This is more important than your job, Emma." The sharpness in her voice made me flinch. "It's about Alex." Of course, it was about Alex. It was always about Alex. My brother had walked out of our lives 8 years ago, 1 month after his 18th birthday. No warning, no goodbye, just an empty bedroom and a note that said, "Don't look for me." He'd contact our parents occasionally, a text at Christmas, a call on their anniversary, just enough to let them know he was alive. He never asked about me. It took me years to build a life beyond the shadow of my parents' grief. I put myself through college with scholarships and night jobs, graduated with honors, and secured a position at one of the top marketing firms in Chicago. My apartment might be small, but every inch of it was mine. Every decision, every success earned without my family's help or approval. "I'll come Friday night," I finally said, knowing resistance was futile. My mother's relieved sigh told me I'd made the right choice for them anyway. Driving up the familiar oak-lined street to my childhood home sent a wave of unease through me. Nothing had changed. The same faded blue paint, the same crooked mailbox with Caldwell painted in my father's precise handwriting. I parked behind my father's immaculate sedan and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. The house smelled exactly the same, pine cleaner and the perpetual scent of my mother's cinnamon candles. Family photos lined the entryway wall, a chronological map of our lives. I paused at the newest edition, my parents standing proudly at my college graduation. I remembered that day clearly, my name being called, scanning the audience, the surprise of actually seeing them there. But even more jarring were the photos of Alex, still prominently displayed. 8 years gone, yet his presence filled the house more completely than mine ever had. His high school portrait, hockey trophies, and academic awards remained untouched, preserved like artifacts in a museum dedicated to the son they'd lost. As I stepped into the living room, my parents rose from the sofa, their faces etched with an expectation that made my chest tighten. Whatever this emergency was, I already knew I wouldn't like it. No one expected the silence to feel so suffocating. My father cleared his throat, gesturing toward the armchair across from them. That chair, isolated, facing the couch like a defendant's stand, told me everything I needed to know about where I stood. "Emma," my father began, his voice taking on that formal tone he reserved for serious discussions. "Your brother is in the hospital." He paused, likely expecting a gasp or tears. I offered neither. "His kidneys are failing. Both of them. He needs a transplant." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. My mother leaned forward, her eyes brightening with tears that seemed practiced, rehearsed for maximum effect. "We've all been tested," she continued when my father's voice faltered. "Your father, me, even Alex's college roommate. None of us are matches." Her gaze intensified, fixing on me with laser precision. "You're our only hope, Emma." There it was, the emergency, the crisis, the reason I'd been summoned home after months of silence. Not to reconnect, not because they missed me, but because my body contained something they needed. "You want my kidney." I stated it plainly, no question in my voice. "It's what family does," my father said, his tone hardening. "We sacrifice for each other, even when it hurts." I nearly laughed at the irony. Family sacrifice, a concept I knew intimately, though always as the giver, never the receiver. Every birthday when Alex got the better gift because boys are harder to shop for. Every school event my parents missed because Alex had a game the same day. Every dream I'd postponed because the family needed something else more. "Where is he?" I asked, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Memorial Hospital, downtown." My mother answered quickly, hope flaring in her expression. "He's been on dialysis for months. The doctors say. Months? I interrupted. You've known about this for months, and you're just telling me now? My father's jaw tightened. We didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. We thought someone else would match. Translation, I was their last resort. The backup plan when all better options failed. Alex doesn't even know we're asking you. My mother admitted quietly. He's been reluctant to reach out. 8 years of silence, and now he needed a piece of me to survive. The perfect metaphor for our relationship. I need time to think, I said, rising from the chair. My legs felt unsteady, but I forced them to support me. This isn't a small thing you're asking. What's there to think about? My father's voice rose, confusion and anger mingling in equal measure. This is your brother's life. Richard, my mother cautioned, placing a restraining hand on his arm. Her eyes never left my face, calculating. Of course, Emma needs to process this. It's a surgical procedure. There are risks. Her reasonable tone couldn't mask the implication. Any risk to me was negligible compared to what Alex faced. The testing alone will take several days. She continued smoothly. You can stay in your old room while we sort this out. My old room unchanged since high school. A shrine to the person they wanted me to be, not who I'd become. The walls suddenly felt too close, the air too thin. I'll stay at the Hampton Inn. I replied, ignoring my mother's hurt expression. I need space to think. As I turned to leave, my father's words followed me, sharp as daggers. I never thought you'd be this selfish, Emma. Your brother would do it for you in a heartbeat. I paused at the door, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Would he? I guess we'll never know, since he chose to disappear from my life 8 years ago. The door closed behind me with a finality that echoed in my chest. In my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what they were asking and the crushing certainty that nothing I'd ever done would matter as much to them as this one sacrifice. The night at the Hampton Inn passed in a blur of restless research. By morning, my laptop screen glowed with medical terms I'd never thought I'd need to understand: nephrectomy, creatinine levels, immunosuppressants. Every article confirmed what I already suspected. Donating a kidney wasn't like giving blood. It was major surgery with real risks and a recovery that would derail my life for weeks, possibly months. I knew what my parents expected: immediate, unquestioning agreement. But the woman I'd become, the one who'd built a life on her own terms, refused to be rushed into a decision that would permanently alter my body. I needed facts, not emotional manipulation. Which is why I found myself walking through the sliding doors of Memorial Hospital the next morning, determined to speak with a transplant specialist. The hospital's transplant center was on the 4th floor, a maze of hallways that smelled of antiseptic and artificial flowers. I hadn't told my parents I was coming. This visit was for me to understand exactly what they were asking of me. I'd like to speak with someone about kidney donation. I told the receptionist, who directed me to a waiting area where informational videos played on a loop. As I waited, I scanned the pamphlets stacked neatly on side tables. Living donation. The gift of life. One proclaimed, showing a smiling donor and recipient embracing. The simplicity of the image made me bristle. Nothing about this situation felt simple. Miss Caldwell? A woman in a white coat appeared, clipboard in hand. I'm Dr. Sharma, one of the transplant coordinators. You're interested in donation? I followed her to a small consultation room, explaining my situation in measured terms. Dr. Sharma nodded, her expression neutral but kind. Donation is a personal choice, she said firmly. While it can be life-saving for the recipient, we prioritize the well-being physical and emotional of potential donors. She outlined the extensive testing process, the surgery itself, and the recovery period. 6 to 8 weeks before you can return to normal activities, she emphasized. And there are long-term considerations: dietary restrictions, regular checkups, the need to protect your remaining kidney. As Dr. Sharma spoke, a young woman with a toddler on her hip passed by the open door, pausing to speak to a nurse. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar: the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, perhaps, or the cadence of her laugh. That's Mrs. Caldwell, the nurse said, loud enough for me to hear. Still here every day, bless her heart. My breath caught. Caldwell wasn't an uncommon name, but the coincidence felt too precise. Dr. Sharma noticed my distraction. Is everything all right? That woman, who is she? I can't discuss other patients. Dr. Sharma replied carefully. I thanked her for the information and excused myself, heart pounding as I followed the young woman at a discreet distance. She entered a room at the end of the hall, leaving the door slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see a hospital bed and the outline of someone lying in it. A man's voice, weak but achingly familiar, drifted into the hallway. "How's my little champion today?" The voice, Alex's voice, held a warmth I'd never heard directed at me. "Daddy missed you," the woman said to the toddler. "Can you wave to Daddy?" Daddy. The word hit me like a physical blow. Alex had a child, a family, a life he'd built without any of us knowing. I stood frozen, unable to retreat or advance, when the woman emerged again, heading toward a vending machine. Our eyes met, and curiosity flickered across her face. "Can I help you?" she asked, shifting the toddler to her other hip. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I was just... What was I doing? Spying on my brother's secret family? Are you here for Alex Caldwell?" Her face brightened. "Yes. Are you one of his colleagues? He'd love a visitor, gets so bored in there." Colleagues, not family. The implication was clear before she even continued speaking. "I'm Megan, his wife," she said, extending her free hand. "And this is Lily. She just turned 2 last month." "I'm Emma," I replied, taking her hand automatically. "I'm his." The words died in my throat as I realized. She had no idea who I was. No idea that her husband had a sister, that her daughter had grandparents living 30 minutes away. "I'm an old friend," I finished lamely, the lie bitter on my tongue. "I heard he was sick." "It's been awful," Megan confided, her voice dropping. "He's been on the transplant list for months. His parents both passed away years ago, and he has no siblings, so finding a donor has been challenging." No siblings. The world tilted beneath my feet. Alex hadn't just abandoned us, he'd erased us entirely. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. My own brother had fabricated an entirely new past, one where I didn't exist at all. I mumbled some excuse to Megan about having another appointment and hurried away, my vision blurring as I fumbled for the elevator buttons. By the time I reached my car, rage had replaced shock, a white-hot fury that burned through my veins. How dare my parents ask me to sacrifice a part of myself for someone who had so completely denied my existence? How dare they prioritize Alex's needs yet again, even after he'd rejected us all? But beneath the anger lay something deeper, more painful. The realization that I needed answers no doctor could provide. I drove straight to my parents' house, no longer caring about maintaining distance or composure. My mother answered the door, surprise flickering across her face at my unannounced arrival. "Emma, we didn't expect." "Did you know?" I demanded, brushing past her into the entryway. "Did you know Alex tells people he's an only child? That his wife thinks you and Dad are dead?" My mother's face drained of color. She glanced toward my father's study, her fingers twisting the edge of her cardigan, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood confrontations. "Richard," she called, her voice thin with tension. "Emma's here." My father emerged, reading glasses perched on his nose, a folder in his hand. "Medical papers," I realized. "Transplant information. Always preparing, always planning for Alex." "You've been to the hospital," he stated, not a question. "I met his wife," I replied, watching their faces carefully. She had no idea who I was. She thinks Alex is an orphan with no family. Neither of them seemed surprised. The silence that followed confirmed what I already suspected. They knew. They'd known all along that Alex had erased us from his new life, and still they were willing to sacrifice me for him. "Why?" I whispered, the single word encompassing a universe of questions. My father sighed, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose, the gesture he used when facing an unpleasant task. "It's complicated, Emma." "Uncomplicated," I snapped. "What aren't you telling me?" My mother stepped forward, her hand outstretched in a placating gesture that only fueled my anger. "Let's sit down, dear. This isn't a conversation for the hallway." I followed them to the living room, the same scene as yesterday, but with the power dynamic subtly shifted. This time, I wasn't the summoned daughter awaiting instructions. I was the accuser, demanding truth. "Alex found out something before he left," my father finally said, his voice carefully measured. "Something that upset the balance of our family." "What could possibly justify erasing me from his life?" I demanded. "What secret was so terrible that—" "He found his adoption papers," my mother interrupted, the words tumbling out. "In the attic, when he was helping your father store Christmas decorations. He was never supposed to. We were going to tell him when the time was right." The room seemed to tilt. Alex is adopted? My father nodded stiffly. We adopted him when he was 3 months old. We couldn't have children, or so we thought. Then, miraculously, you came along 2 years later. Our biological miracle. The implications crashed over me in waves. Alex, the beloved firstborn, not their flesh and blood. Me, the unexpected biological child, the living reminder of what they had wanted but thought they couldn't have. He was devastated. My mother continued. He felt replaced, like he wasn't really ours anymore. So he left because he found out he was adopted, I said slowly. And yet you've spent the last 8 years treating me like I matter less than him. How does that make any sense? My father's face hardened. You've always been stronger than Alex. More independent. You could handle things he couldn't. He's always been more fragile than you. My mother added, the unintentional truth slipping out. You've always been our strong one who could handle anything. And there it was, the awful truth beneath years of unequal treatment. They had compensated for Alex's insecurity by prioritizing him, by making him feel special and chosen even at my expense. My resilience had been used against me, my strength punished while his weakness was rewarded. And now you want me to give him my kidney, I said flatly. After everything, you expect me to literally give him a piece of myself. He's your brother, my father insisted. Despite everything, despite his mistakes, we're family. But as I looked at them, these people who had raised me, who had consistently put someone else's needs above mine, I wondered what family truly meant, and whether this version was worth the price they were asking me to pay. Family. The word echoed in my mind as I drove back to the hotel, hollow and distorted like a warped recording. What did that word even mean in the context of our fractured history? The revelation about Alex's adoption explained so much, yet solved nothing. If anything, it made my parents' request even more absurd. They wanted me to undergo major surgery for someone who had completely excised me from his life. The next morning, my mother called before sunrise, her voice tense with barely contained panic. Your father's told the extended family about Alex's condition, she said without preamble. Everyone's coming over tonight. They all want to talk to you. The ambush was so transparent it was almost laughable. You're gathering the troops? Really, Mom? They're concerned, Emma. We all are. This is about saving your brother's life. I agreed to come, not because I was swayed by her manipulation, but because something in me needed to face this head-on. To finally stand my ground in the house where I'd always been expected to yield. The scene that greeted me that evening was exactly as I'd anticipated. A living room filled with relatives I rarely saw, their faces arranged in expressions of solemn concern. Aunt Diane, who sent me $15 gift cards on Christmas but paid for Alex's entire first semester of college. Uncle Paul, who never remembered my birthday but kept a scrapbook of Alex's hockey achievements. Cousins who had followed Alex's lead in treating me as an afterthought. My father stood at the center of the room, playing conductor to this orchestra of guilt. Emma, he announced as I entered, everyone's here to support us through this difficult time. The subtext was clear. To support them in convincing me to donate. I scanned the room, noting the stage quality of it all, the medical pamphlets conspicuously displayed on the coffee table, the framed photos of Alex prominently positioned. A perfect tableau of family unity, with me cast as the selfish outsider. Uncle Paul stepped forward first, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. We know this is a lot to ask, Emma, but it's what family does for each other. That phrase again. What family does wielded like a weapon? When has Alex ever done anything for me? I asked quietly, shrugging off his hand. When have any of you? A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. My mother stepped in quickly, her voice honey-sweet with practiced patience. Emma's just processing. The doctors explained there are risks involved. Yes. Let's talk about those risks. I interrupted, reaching into my bag for the folder of information Dr. Sharma had given me. Did you tell everyone that I'd be facing major surgery with potential complications including hemorrhage, blood clots, and infection? That my remaining kidney could fail someday? That I'd need to change my diet, lifestyle, and medical care forever? My father's jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. Thousands of people donate kidneys. And they do it willingly. I cut in. They aren't emotionally blackmailed into it by family who've spent years treating them as an afterthought. The room fell silent, the accusation hanging in the air like smoke. My body belongs to me. I continued, my voice steadier than I'd expected. Not to this family. Not to Alex. Not to anyone but me. And I'm not giving up a kidney to someone who pretends I don't exist. You selfish little. my father began. But Aunt Maggie, my mother's older sister, who had remained silent in the corner, raised her hand. "Richard, enough," she said sharply. Everyone turned, surprised by her intervention. Aunt Maggie rarely opposed my father's authority in family matters. She crossed the room to stand beside me, her hand finding mine in a show of solidarity that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "They've asked too much of you your entire life," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "It's time someone stood up for you." The simple validation, the first I'd ever received in that house, broke something open inside me. Years of suppressed hurt and anger spilled out as I finally gave voice to truths long left unspoken. I have spent my entire life being the strong one, being overlooked, being asked to sacrifice for Alex's benefit, I said, addressing not just my parents but the entire assembled family. "And now you want the ultimate sacrifice, a piece of my body, for someone who has chosen to erase me from his life completely." My mother began to cry, the tears that had always been her most effective tool. But for once, they didn't move me. "I'll help find other options," I said firmly. "I'll research donor programs, fundraise for his medical bills, support his family, but I will not give him my kidney. Not like this. Not under these conditions." As relatives shifted uncomfortably and exchanged glances, I realized I had finally done the unthinkable in the Caldwell household. I had put myself first. The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. It was as if the Caldwell family machine, so well-oiled in its operation of emotional manipulation, had suddenly ground to a halt. Without waiting for their recovery, I walked out, Aunt Maggie's hand still firmly clasped in mine. That night marked the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of another one written entirely on my own terms. 6 months passed like a deep cleansing breath. Spring turned to summer, and with it came a clarity I'd never known before. The immediate aftermath had been predictable. My parents' desperate attempts to change my mind, followed by cold silence when they realized I wouldn't bend. But what surprised me was how quickly their attention shifted. Within weeks, they had moved on to pursuing other options, say, transplant exchange program that matched incompatible donor pairs, fundraising for potential treatments abroad. Alex received a kidney 3 months after our family showdown, not from me, but from an altruistic donor through a paired exchange program I had researched and pointed them toward. I never visited him in the hospital, never met his daughter properly. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt, at least not with the same materials. My parents and I maintained a distant, formal relationship, holiday calls, occasional emails, the bare minimum to acknowledge our biological connection without pretending we shared anything deeper. It wasn't forgiveness, I wasn't sure I would ever reach that point, but it was a kind of peace, built on firm boundaries and mutual understanding of where we stood. Aunt Maggie became my unexpected ally and confidant. At 68, she had witnessed the family dynamics from the beginning, had seen how my parents' fear of losing their adopted son had warped their treatment of their biological daughter. "Your mother was always afraid Alex would discover he wasn't really theirs," she explained during one of our monthly lunches. "So she overcompensated, and your father followed her lead. They convinced themselves it was love, but it was really fear." Understanding the why didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me process it. To see my parents as flawed humans rather than the omnipotent arbiters of my worth they had seemed throughout my childhood. The greatest transformation, though, was within myself. The woman who had walked out of that family gathering was not the same one who had reluctantly driven home at her mother's summons. I moved to Seattle that fall, accepting a promotion I would have declined a year earlier out of some misplaced sense of family obligation. I bought a small house with a garden view and painted the walls colors my mother would have deemed impractical. On my 30th birthday, celebrated with friends who valued me for exactly who I was, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a vintage silver bracelet and a note in Aunt Maggie's elegant script. "This belonged to your grandmother. She would have wanted it to go to a woman who knows her own mind and heart. You stood up when it mattered most. Never forget that strength." I later learned from Maggie that Alex had recovered well from his transplant. His family remained intact. His life continued on its separate trajectory from mine. Sometimes I wondered if his daughter would ever know she had an aunt, or if he would maintain the fiction of being an only child, an orphan. It was no longer my concern. What I did know with absolute certainty was that my body remained whole, not just physically, but in a deeper sense. I had reclaimed ownership of my life, my choices, my boundaries. The kidney that my family had seen as a spare part to be harvested for someone more deserving remained exactly where it belonged. And for the first time in my life, so did my sense of self-worth. Family isn't just about shared blood or shared histories. It's about shared respect. Sometimes the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong, but between your own survival and others' expectations. I chose myself, and in doing so, finally became the person I was always meant to be. Not the strong one, who could handle anything, but simply Emma complete, sufficient, and worthy of standing firmly in her own truth. In the end, family isn't measured by what you're willing to sacrifice, but by what you're mutually willing to respect. I learned that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for survival in a world that's always asking for more than you can give. My kidney stayed where it belonged, and for the first time, so did my self-worth. Sometimes the strongest family ties aren't the ones we're born with, but the ones we choose to create with people who see our value without demanding pieces of us in return. If my story resonated with you, know that you're not alone in having to make impossible choices between pleasing others and preserving yourself. Your body, your boundaries, and your decisions belong to you, and recognizing that truth is the first step toward freedom. I'd love to hear about a time you had to stand your ground with family in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button to help others find it. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now.